Hi, everyone. This is Joni McGarry. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before we get to the show, I'd like to say a few words about a company called Crowd Health. I recently became a member of Crowd Health after I stopped purchasing health insurance, something I previously thought was unthinkable. But I found Crowd Health instead. It's not insurance, but it's an excellent alternative. It's a platform and a community that empowers you with a crowdfunding tool and a suite of resources to help you effectively and efficiently manage your healthcare costs. Crowd Health members pay a $60 monthly membership fee, and then once a month, you'll be asked to fund another member's healthcare expenses. It is entirely transparent. You will know exactly what the maximum ask per month will be. And most months, it's below the maximum. I'm saving a lot of money in premiums, and I feel very secure that should something happen to trigger a medical bill for me, the crowd will have my back. And to that end, their track record is superb. Over the past 5 years since they were founded, they have funded 99.9% of all bills submitted to the group. That's an excellent record, and it outpaces health insurance. It may not be for you because it's not for everyone. You have to be under 65 and you have to be relatively healthy. But it might be for you or somebody you know, so check it out. Go to the link joincrowdhealth.com and make sure you use the code JONI if you decide to join because you'll get a discount on your first 3 months. I'll also put a special link in the show notes for that. I get a referral fee and I'm donating it all to charity. But mostly I'm motivated just wanting to spread the word about this so that people realize they do have an alternative and don't have to keep buying health insurance. So without further delay, let's get to the show. I'm really excited to share with you my conversation with Mark Oshinskie. Mark came to my attention via Substack, where early in the pandemic, he started posting his beautifully written true stories about the COVID response. He writes through the lens of his varied life experiences, his very interesting life experiences, and he calls his stories parables. He's collected a lot of those stories in 2 volumes that are available for purchase, and he continues to write new stories on Substack. I recommend both, and I'll put the links in the show notes. He's the kind of guy that if you had to be stuck in an airport lounge waiting for a flight for a long time, he'd be somebody you'd want to sit next to or have a beer with and just listen to his stories and his life wisdom. He lives in a way that I consider society rebuilding, and he's just an inspiration. And I think you're in for a real treat. Prior to now, he practiced environmental litigation for 30 years, and then he went on to grow food and flowers for the last 10 years. You'll see we just jump right into the conversation with no introduction. He's just really fun to hang out with. So without further delay, let's get to it.
What if you had him in front of a Def Leppard poster,
Malcolm Gladwell.
or anyone for that
Yeah.
matter, right? It would completely undermine their credibility, although it has no intrinsic importance, right? It's just it is what it is, and what you say is what you say, and right? So,
Yeah, I mean, I actually pressed record when you started talking about this, if you don't mind. We don't have to use it, but you were talking about like the backgrounds, and you're right. I mean, this is sort of the best place in my home to record because it's a room that I can shut off and everything else. But it is so pretentious for me to sit in front of this bookshelf. I've read some of the books. My husband's read others. I've started some of these books, but it's yeah, it's kind of ridiculous, but it is what it is, you're right, and I do, try to make it look all professional, smoke and mirrors.
just as an aside on that sub point, over the last few years, you know how as you go through college, you read a lot of books in high school and so forth, and you divest them because you always have to travel lightly, right? And in the last few years, I've started reacquiring a whole bunch of books that I used to read that I have read.
Yes.
And why am I doing that? People say it's kind of silly or whatever. To me, it's two things. Number one, it's kind of a reminder of how you spent your time, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
it's almost like a photo album.
it is exactly very much like that. And it also reminds you of the people that you discuss these books with who told you about these books, right? So it's sort of like a photo album in that sense as well. And the other thing I would say about it is when you look at your bookshelf and someone says, "Oh, you read so and so, tell me about that book." I wouldn't be able to do a very good job at first blush. I have a very good memory overall, but there are many, many pages up there on my bookshelves,
Mhm.
right, at this point, and it's not really fair to do that to someone, but I think there's a whole lot of recognition memory that I have about it, and also, I think that, a lot of that stuff is baked in to your consciousness, but you don't know where it came from. You can attribute it to this book or that book, but you have this idea or this set of ideas that came from somewhere, and a lot of it came from real life because we talked
Mhm.
about that, but a lot of it comes from this book or that book, and you don't remember, that Dostoevsky said this or, Yeats said that sort of thing, right? So, I don't know. I'm doing it, as kind of an amusement thing too. As I go to a library sale, and I go, "Oh, I read that book and I read that book." So I'm bringing back those 3 or 4 books and putting them on the shelves and whatever, and, when you get to this age, you kinda need to account for your life, right?
Yes,
And this
and
is the way to account for my life. I've read a lot of books, for better or worse. So
Yeah, well, and to me, another reason to do it is you can reread the books, which I've reread a lot of books I read in my school days and also post college. I just started reading classics in my 30s because I felt like I hadn't gotten enough of that kind of education because I was like a science major and never inclined toward the humanities or didn't think I had any talent for it. But I sort of gravitate toward fiction. And if I were sitting in front of my fiction bookcase, I would have read all of those books. But another reason, and this ties into why I wanted to have you on the show today, because also just I wanted to have a conversation with you, because to have physical books, I think is really important because nobody can touch them and nobody can change them. And books and things now that are online can be just somebody can go back in and change them, sort of like the Ministry of Truth used to do. And even like certain pieces of fiction, like Roald Dahl's books, have been edited recently to make them more politically correct. Like Augustus Gloop is no longer a fat pig. He's like, weight challenged or whatever. And I would rather have the original versions as written in the context of the time they were written. And I think especially for nonfiction, that's a good thing is to preserve the record. And so by way of introduction, Mark Oshinskie, because we got right into it. I want to welcome you to my podcast, to this conversation. And I invited you on the show because I became familiar with your work on Substack. You are extraordinarily talented essayist, and you started writing about the pandemic in real time, and then you went on to chronicle your writing to preserve it in these two books, which is probably coming up backward, but I'll put them in the show notes. Dispatches from a Scamdemic, Why the Lockdown Masks, Tests, and Shots Were Wrong from the Beginning. And then your second book, Coronamania Chronicles, True Story Revealing All the COVID Lies or the COVID Lies. And what these books are is a series of what you call parables, true stories that you take from your real life to talk about what happened to us, what was done to us. And they are so good. And if they were on any other topic, you would be celebrated in all of the journal. You'd be in the Atlantic, the New Yorker, the New York Times would be featuring you. But because they're countered to the COVID narrative, you are not getting that platform. So thank you for putting these all together. They are wonderful books. Talk to me about them. What led you to do them? How'd you approach the material?
well, I never set out to write a book. What I started to do was, as therapy, write about the scamdemic, as I call it, from the beginning, from the very beginning, from the first night. On the first night, before the lockdowns began, I was listening to WNYC in New York City, which has this kind of ethereal music programming at night. And then you do a news at the top of the hour, and it was dark in my room. And I was there before Ellen was there, so, I was there alone,
Ellen's your wife.
with my wife, yeah, and
Hmm.
so they announced that Cuomo was about to announce a shelter-in-place order, and my ears rang as if they do when I have some, terrible news delivered to me, and
Mm.
so I said, "I can't believe this is happening. This is just completely ridiculous and horrible. I saw where it was going to lead if it happened." And I lay there in bed and I couldn't sleep, and I'm normally pretty quick to sleep. So I got up and I wrote this first essay about, you know, the lockdown idea and generational injustice, because that's really the main prism I saw through it, at least initially, was this whole idea that you're doing this unprecedented intervention on behalf of some very old people who are going to die anyway. And they're depriving young people of many of the things that will give their life meaning for many more years. It just really, really bothered me. Let me say this because you're out there in Bloomington,
Hmm.
Indiana, and you and I have both lived there various times. When I was a student there in my second year, I would visit nursing homes twice a week. There was one called Fontainebleau. I don't think it's still there because
No, I don't think so, but what a
yeah,
fancy name
I
for
know exactly.
a Hoosier town.
For one and for two, just the dismalness of the setting,
Yeah.
right? Right. Completely incongruous. But Fontainebleau and the other one's called Bloomington Nursing Home. And I went to one on Wednesday night and the other one Saturday morning, uh, alone. And I hated it, but
Why did you do it?
I did it every week because I thought it was important for me to experience it.
What?
And also because I maybe have my reasons reversed. I thought it was a service to the people there. I thought it was something that, wasn't kind of lofty and indirect. It was face to face. It was personal. It was real. And a few of the people there each week were able to kind of have conversations and seem to appreciate that. So that kept me going back. But at that same time, every week when I had to do each one of those visits, I had to motivate myself to do it because I had seen old age before.
Yeah, it's
You know,
not pretty.
right. Well, but not to that extent, Joni, because my grandparents were still kind of vital at that age. But I hadn't seen what real old age looks like.
Mhm,
And it's a powerful message to an 18, 19-year-old to see what that life is like and to know your clock is ticking just like theirs is. And you better make the best of this time, right? Because you will one day end up in their position, if you live that long. And so that's why I did it. And so this all comes back to the whole COVID thing. When heard people were dying, I said, yeah, how old were they? The
mhm.
first person that died in New Jersey was 96-year-old and in nursing.
Most people don't live to 96.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And moreover, it's just disingenuous to grieve about strangers like that who you don't know. Um, and they're in a condition where death is merciful. It's a countercultural idea, but it shouldn't be, because at a certain age, in a certain condition, a lot of those people would wish to die. I've heard them say this, and so this whole idea that we could construct this narrative of mass death around a bunch of people that were going to die anyway, and to use it opportunistically to, manipulate the economy, manipulate elections, manipulate social structure. It just sickened me. And so that's how I started with the whole thing. And then I wrote one after that. The next essay I wrote was a few weeks later. It's the one about the caribou. I don't know if you read that one.
I've read so many of them, I don't remember all of them, but tell me more.
All right. So I used to hitchhike around when I was in my 20s, and I was out in British Columbia hitchhiking. And I met a guy, picked me up, and he took me to a bar. He was a friendly guy, and we sat at the bar and drinking. He said, "I want you to take you to this bar. We'll have a couple of beers, and you go on your way, whatever." He started talking about his time as a gas rig operator in in Manitoba, and he said, I used to work at the top of a gas rig, and I was there 2 weeks at a time. They
I
would
do remember
helicopter me
this.
in. Yeah, and so he said, "I saw something today that reminded me of my time there," and he had this faraway look in his eyes. I said, "Oh, this is gonna be an interesting story." And he said, "I was in Vancouver today," and, he said it was actually Victoria, and he said, "I saw a guy in the street, and people were around him on the sidewalk," and he said he was, as the people cleared a space from, I could see that he was dying. He had a heart attack, and all the people gathered around him silently, and they couldn't do anything. He was gone already. And they just kind of paid respects to him and then scattered. He said, "So when I was out of my gas rig, I used to sit up, well above the ground, and you could see the horizon way far out.
Mhm.
And there was white snow, expanse in the winter. and this dark herd of caribou would walk by. And I don't know how much you know about the caribou migration, but it's a long trip. It's an arduous trip. It thins the herd just by as nature does. And so he said, what happens is you can see such an expanse that um, you'll see them approach, on the eastern horizon and walk west during the day, and one will die, and they will do the same thing as I saw today in Victoria. They will gather around the deceased, pay the respects, and march on because they have to march on to get to their feeding grounds or their breeding grounds. They alternate back
Mhm.
and forth between the two. And he said, they all know implicitly, intuitively, that this is the way societies operate. We all have
Mhm.
things to do to keep the herd alive.
Mhm.
And the fact that a member drops out occasionally is accepted. It's mourned,
Mhm.
but it's accepted, and the herd knows that it must move on. And
Right.
so this is the metaphor through which I saw a lot of what happened too.
Yeah, and this story, is very similar to how you approached all the stories in or what you call parables in your book is you realize and I didn't get onto it as quickly as you do. It took a while for me to wake up, but what you how you approach your life and especially the COVID situation, which is so wise, is you look at your past experiences, informal and formal education, what you have smelled, seen, experienced, touched, and felt, this whole body of knowledge that you carry. And then you observe the current situation firsthand instead of tuning in to being told you should be afraid and all these terrible things are happening. And what I love about your essays is they are through that lens. You're actually looking around you and you're not arguing with what is being broadcast to everybody. You're not arguing with the data. You're not being oppositional, but what you're doing is gently pointing out that none of it makes sense. And here's why, based on your human experience. Um, I think that's a really wise lens, and it isn't very common.
I think so much can be learned just by walking around and talking to people and seeing what they do, and never more than at this time. I think um, I did litigation for 30 years, and the central tenet of litigation is the party seeking to change the status quo has the burden of proof.
So the plaintiff
Well, yeah,
or somebody who's suing or
you're right, and or the prosecutor who wants to put someone in jail, right?
okay.
Both
Mhm.
those classes of attorneys have the burden of proof. Both those parties have the burden of proof. And I thought to myself, yeah, this, given my life experiences, I'm seeing things a certain way. You're going to have to talk me out of that. And where are your proofs? So I didn't watch a lot of news then. I knew intuitively that this was wrong. Uh, and just from a biological standpoint, I knew it was wrong. And that a bunch of my life experiences, I began to think, where did these ideas come from? And I thought of this experience and that experience. And I said, yeah, that reminds me when I was, 12 years old playing Little League Baseball, or that reminds me when, I had a job as a roofer and this sort of thing. This whole idea as a roofer, for example, that you go up on a roof every day in really hot weather, very high off the ground. If you fall from there, you will be seriously injured, and people are, and they die from that. But no one gives it a second thought that a 25-year-old would be seriously injured, unless you're a roofer, I suppose. Uh, and yet, at the same time, all these same people were fine with locking down society on behalf of some people that were going to die anyway. It made no
Right.
sense in general.
Right.
Whole orientation toward risk got really out of whack during this whole thing.
Well, nobody is safe unless we're all safe. If it saves one life, it's worth it. Why do you think people were so happy to jump on board?
I think several reasons. I think, I've never been able to divide the groups into set, pie chart percentages, but I'm certain a lot of people saw opportunity in it. They didn't want to commute to the office.
Mhm.
They saw political opportunity in it. They saw economic opportunity in it. A lot of people said, "Wait, I can get PPP. I don't have to work for a while
Mm.
now. I'll get free money. I won't have to work." There was that aspect. I think a lot of people were afraid too.
Yeah,
I can't relate to that personally, but I think it was genuine as some people, and I think the reason I couldn't relate to it is I'm not a TV watcher generally. I'm not a movie watcher, and I understand there have been programs and movies about contagions. And
sure.
this terrible contagion is going to sweep society and kill everyone. It's like, why would that happen now? Why, for the first time in biological and human history, would that happen?
Right,
It made no sense.
right.
And yet people they love to be afraid. It's kinda like going to an amusement park, right? You see this huge roller coaster and people line up for it, and I'm one of those people, but, part of
Oh
it is
gosh, I'm not. I was just
part of
talking to Mary Bowden about the Dr. Bowden about this, roller coasters, but go on.
what did she say?
Well, she says that part of the way she, lives well in this world is doing things like going on roller coasters with her sons, and she's had to overcome her fear of that. And I mentioned that I took one ride with my daughter. We got off the ride, and I said, "Oh my gosh, that was awful." And she said, "Yes, that was the worst experience in my life." And I said, "Why? Were you afraid too?" She's like, "No, sitting next to you, terrible." I mean, it was awful. So, yes, I think people do like to be afraid, and I was one of those people at the beginning. And I look back on it and I can't believe I bought it, but I was afraid. I did the distancing, was masking, I was whatever. But then as soon as vaccine was spoken, a switch was flipped in my head and I thought, "Oh dear, this isn't good." And it all fell away, and my husband was onto it before I was too, but so I do relate to the people that were afraid, but I'm sort of amazed that I bought it because I have some biology background too, and I should have known better.
Yeah, a reason I wasn't afraid was I've had near-death experiences and come through them, and I talk about some of those in the book, and some of 'em I don't talk about because 'cause they're a little
Mhm.
too hard to talk about. But I feel like I have been living on borrowed time since I'm 18, you know,
Yeah.
um, and half a dozen times since then, at least. So I've kinda had to make my peace with that
Mhm.
experience already.
Well, I think that most people are really afraid of dying,
Yeah.
um, and they don't even realize it, and I I think that that was part of the thing that people plugged into. But going back to, like, when you started writing about this, when did you decide to make your writing public? And what did that cost you in terms of I mean, or just, your determination not to, go along to get along, to be in the world authentically as talking about how you saw things. Tell about that and what happened to you as a result, if anything.
Well, on the very first night when I wrote that essay and I sent it to New York Times
Where you had
Philly.
previously had work
Yeah,
published.
I've gotten stuff in a lot of papers, so it's
Mhm,
nothing, I know how to write to the format, we'll put it that way,
mhm.
and nobody would touch this, and that was telling to me, right?
Yeah.
Because I thought it was pretty well constructed, it's in the book, and, um, that was a really dark sign. Even darker sign to me was that I sent it out to 20 friends out of 20 roughly. Out of 20, 1 agreed with me.
And
1. And I said,
I'm
"This
surprised you
is."
got one.
Yeah, well, but they did get 1, and I will never forget that person, and I've thanked him repeatedly since then, because I was certain I was right, but at the same time, I wanted to know that other people saw it. I needed to know that because I was
Yeah,
trying to rally opposition right from the
yeah,
beginning.
yeah,
Let's do a march. I put a sign up on my house, a sign on my car, and this and the next thing. It was lonesome.
yeah.
And why did I write? Because I had to write. I couldn't hold the feelings that I had inside. It's just too dark, uh, in the near term and in the long term. I couldn't believe that people were going along with it. So I couldn't help myself is the short
Mhm,
answer.
mhm.
And I didn't care, uh, that it would alienate people. I thought the stakes were high enough that it didn't matter to me to lose friends over it, and I certainly
Mhm.
did lose friends over it.
Yes.
And those friends are not coming back,
Mm,
and I accept that. But I've met a lot of people, as you have during the last few years, that are outstanding, thoughtful people, and you just make a new set of friends. You say to
mhm,
yourself, friendships are of their time.
mhm.
Thankfully, my wife and I were on the same page throughout on this,
Yes. Yes,
and
so many people weren't, and
I know.
families were severed as a result, marriages, parental relationships, grandparental relationships,
Yeah,
it's really tragic, and I think some of the design is for that to happen, to fracture society for whatever purposes and by whoever is leading it. It's a divide and conquer, and keep us at each other's throats. Yeah.
agreed. It's very
Um,
dark.
did the other 19 people respond?
Most didn't respond at any length.
Mm.
The response that I got maybe from 7 of them, let's say, was, "You're not a doctor," right? I
Well,
mean,
like you didn't know that.
yes, exactly. But as a way, to say, "I only trust the doctors. I don't trust
Yeah.
my own logic. I don't trust, my life experience. None of that matters. It's all about what a doctor says to me."
Well, it's interesting that the medical community in general, the doctors didn't, ask any questions, and that could be because, they're now all employed by hospital systems,
Right.
but there was and my husband's a doctor, and he he wasn't on board, and just about every physician we know, in our physician community, and we know quite a few of them because of he's, was practicing for a long time, they still think that, well, maybe mistakes were made or it's behind us, and there's still not a questioning of it. And I was reading your recent piece on Substack called "A Crack in the COVID Wall of Silence," where, and you can tell about it, where a friend of yours finally said, maybe you all were right about everything. I don't have that experience in my life.
I only had it one time, Joni, and that's why I wrote about it. Actually, you know what? It's interesting. No, it's twice. He admitted it to me spontaneously, just in conversation. I went for my annual physical a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, and my doctor said it to me because she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm writing about the whole COVID thing." And she kind of shook her head. I said, "It was so phony. It was so damaging." And she shook her head and said, "I agree." And I thought, well,
Wow.
it took you 6 years to come around
Yeah,
almost, like, and we
but you
she and
came
I have
around.
I only see her once a year when I have this physical,
Yeah,
um, but it's a pretty good session, we're kinda honest with each other, and
that's
I
rare
disag
and great.
yeah, I disagree with her about certain things, and she gives me space to disagree, but I'm respectful about it,
Mhm.
but yeah, like, she wants me to take a statin, for example, and I said, "Yeah, I will never do that." I said, "I'll die before I take a statin." And I said, "And by the way, my triglycerides are pretty good, right?" She goes, "Right." I said, "Okay, then. I rest my case," right?
Right, right, yeah,
So, it's not just a bias against the medication, it's based on things I've read, and
right,
things I've heard people say, again, about the experience of taking such things. So I said, "I'm not doing that." So,
yeah,
anyway,
and
um
I think once you see, like, during this experience that institutions will lie to you, they
oh,
will spin data, they will suppress, an opposing narrative. After that, what else what else are we being lied to again? And I think some of my friends, or they would probably think I'm crazy for thinking like this. And they know what I did during the pandemic. I mean, I was fairly public about it. I was on national news a couple times. I mean, so people knew what I was doing. And some people, I think our friendships have just fallen away, but I'm still in a group with other people, like a small friend group that didn't take that position, and they they can't understand, I don't think, or they don't think about why I would think so differently from them, and they have never asked me really. A couple might have, but the other night I was out to dinner with a group of, good friends or long time friends, and they started talking about a guy whose daughter had been estranged from him because of COVID, and she didn't take the shots, and he was all about them. They were estranged, and the person sitting next to me said, "Oh, yeah, she was one of them." So I just looked at her, I said, "Well, I'm one of them." I mean, like, what does that even mean,
what
one of them? The people, who
what's
didn't take the
stopping what's stopping you from having that discussion with her on the side?
Well, I think I will. I mean, it was so in the moment, and, because I wanna ask, like, what is one of them, and what do you base your beliefs on? And so it was, Yeah, it was just a reminder that I'm still one of them. We're still divided in the them, they, you, me, other thing, and, I haven't seen a lot of bridging of that, and I think books like yours, and I recommend it to everybody, are gentle ways to bridge that divide. Then the essays are standalone. It's like you can keep these books on your coffee table or by your bedstand. Just pick it up. It's like a Bible. You can just pick it up, read a story. You don't have to commit to a couple hours. Put it down and just be reminded of reality, and how to live. I mean, they're all little missives on how to be in the world. I mean, you don't even have a cell phone.
It's true.
Which and you talk about that, tell me more about that choice and what you tell people when they say, "Oh, what if something happens?"
Yeah. When I mention that to people, they're more surprised about that than anything I could tell them. It's the response is uniformly stunned.
It's shocking when someone
Shocked.
doesn't have one.
Yeah. So, I'm not above trying to make a statement in life. I'm not all about making a statement, but I'm not above, expressing my view, even if it's
Yeah.
unpopular. We've just established that. This was not that for me. The phone thing started because I can be a little forgetful, and I also don't like to have things on my person. I like to travel light. The whole
Mm,
book thing too, divesting books and then reacquiring them. So really, it was more about that, and also the idea that sometimes I want to be unreachable. Was that Carlos Castaneda talked about? The key to enlightenment is to be accessible. The first step to enlightenment is to be inaccessible. They say accessible, be inaccessible.
mhm.
So I want to be out somewhere where no one knows where I am, no one can call me up and interrupt what I'm doing. So those are the main reasons. It was like two selfish reasons rather than making a statement.
Mhm.
And since then, I guess it's become kind of a statement in the sense of, it's not even that because I don't care that strongly about it. If someone to carry a cell phone, that's fine with me. It's not like asking me to take a shot. I don't believe.
Right, right. Or coercing you to take a shot to keep your job, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. So again, it's not like something I believe strongly about. It just works for me, not to
Yeah,
carry something. That's the main thing. Not to
yeah,
leave something behind, and not to be interrupted when I'm doing something I want to do.
right.
So,
Yeah, I really wish I think about, divesting myself of my phone, um, and I'm not there yet. I wanna talk
I
about,
was to say
mm,
one other thing. People say that to me all the time, Joni, and I say, "You can do it. I'm functioning in the world with that one. You can do it." And they go, "I know, but," they just
For me, you know what it is? Like, well, there are a lot of things, but navigation. I was thinking the other day about, a memory I had of being on Long Island, going out to make a call. I used to be in sales and, missing the turn. And then I was just thinking about that and I thought, "How did I get to places?" I had maps. And before I would go to places, I would map out my route and I would know where to turn. And it would probably be good to revisit that practice. Yeah.
just one other thing in that vein. I think life, and you see that reflected in the books as well, in the stories, needs to be a little surprising. It
Yeah.
needs to have some inconvenience built in, and it needs to have chance encounters with people you wouldn't have met otherwise. And not having a phone opens you up to more of that.
Well, that's certainly true, which leads what I wanted to talk to you more about is, besides your essays and your books, the life choices that you have made, inspire me. And what's really fun about, having met you is first started reading you on Substack, and I thought, "Wow, I love this guy. I love his writing. It's really great." And then I happened to be lucky enough to just meet you in a chance encounter, sort of, at Polyface Farms, and get your books and establish like a little bit of a correspondence and invite you on this show. What was my point in this? Oh, and in learning about you through your writing, I realized that you and I have both were at Cornell, both were at IU. So we have these little points of connection, which is kind of neat. And I just like the life choices that you talk about, sort of in your book, you make reference to them. It sort of paints a picture of someone who, um, did a lot of interesting things and didn't get on the track. You didn't just put your head down, study this one thing, go to law school, do this and stay in it. You have had a variety of experiences and you really live. And you were so if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about your life history and how you made the choices that some people would see as alternative, going from a litigator to working to be in like to grow food and flowers, like talk about more of that. I am inspired.
Well, my little brother once accused me of just doing stuff to get a good story out of it.
What's wrong with that?
That's what I said to him. I
And you
said,
write really
"Guilty."
good stories.
Exactly.
What else
So
is there?
exactly. So he didn't get it. A lot of people don't get it, but I think there's value in that. I like to not only have my own stories, I like to hear other people's stories too, right? And
Mhm.
so I'm happy to do that. Here's something, that I probably haven't written about so much, but my father worked in a factory his whole life, in a car factory. He worked a lot of hours, he worked a lot of nights, he worked a lot of days. I didn't see him sometimes for months on end because he was
Wow.
on a day-night schedule,
Mhm.
and I
And
was
where
on
where was this, Mark?
North Jersey,
Mhm.
place called Mahwah. Used to
Mhm.
be the country's biggest auto plant was there for a while.
Wow. Who knew?
Yeah, well, he worked there from the day it opened until the day it closed,
Wow.
and, I used to go there with him on weekends because he was a machinist, and so we had to fix machines on the weekends. Sometimes if we were on our way to somewhere, he'd stop in and do a little bit of that. But I saw that life that he lived, it was very labor intensive. It was extremely labor intensive, and I said, "If I can avoid that life, I wanna do that." I went to law school thinking that, "Oh, I can get a job and then I can kinda work a regular, 9 to 5, 9 to 6 sort of day," and, um my first year in law school, I was talking to some, people whose parents were attorneys, and my father was a machinist, and they said, "Oh, yeah, and then you go work for a firm, you work 70 hours a week," and I laughed. I said, "Yeah, okay, right." They said, "What are you laughing about?" I said, "That's not true." He goes, "It's totally true.
Yes,
That's
it is.
that's the way law firms are." And my ears rang. I'm like, "Oh, no, I've made a terrible mistake." I'm serious. It was a really bad moment for me, and I said to myself, "I gotta find some way I can do this
But you still
without
finished.
giving my." Oh, yeah, I did, and I not giving my life over to it, you know? So I did. I ended up working for the attorney general for 25 years, and I did 27 years, and then I did 3 years of private practice, like solo stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and I stopped doing law at that age because I said, "I wanna do something different while I'm still vital." And so that's when I got into the food and flowers, and I was doing some construction then as well. Um, because I like working with my hands, I like being outside,
Mhm.
and fundamentally, I think if you don't need a lot of money, you can have a lot of options in life, right? And or
Right.
at least in the US. Um, and so I was able to do that, and thankfully, and my wife is a wonderful person, and she's very unspoiled. Her father also worked in a factory that, you're not expecting much materially, and that frees you up to take jobs that pay less money, you know,
Mhm.
and work fewer hours and that sort of thing. So to me, I was thankful to have that choice because a lot of people don't have that choice, or they're so motivated by money, and I'm not casting aspersions on that,
Mhm.
but it comes at personal cost.
Well, your stuff owns you, for sure,
Yeah,
and some people, they don't have that choice because they have to work really hard just to provide enough, for
exactly.
whatever reason, and I think some of the societal, things that have happened, say, since the '50s or since we were growing up, have set people up to have to work harder because they think they need more stuff. And the more, like, I have to have the phone, I have to have the Netflix, I have to have all these things, 2 new cars, whatever. But you didn't you made those choices. Like, you were fortunate, yes, but you decided, like, that was, a life value, which, is very admirable, and I do think it does lead to, a more interesting life, a richer life.
Well, thanks for saying it's admirable. I see it more as kind of what worked for me, what I wanted to work for me.
Yeah.
and being married to someone who's willing to put up with, 10, 12-year-old car and a smaller house and, you know, just simpler stuff. And
Mhm.
2 of my kids got full scholarship to college. That was really a major
Oh, that's great.
yeah, that was really a major blessing. So they gifted me with that, and so it all worked out. One of my daughters said to me, um, that she read somewhere that, um, their parents spent time with them, not money on them, and she said, "I thought that's what, I would say about you." Right? So
What better?
yeah, I mean, but again, I was glad I had the opportunity to do it. Some
Yeah,
people pressures that don't allow them to do that.
right.
So,
Well, so how did you go from law to gardening? And were you doing gardening on the side because you were employed as I don't know if it's gardener, whatever the
yeah.
tell how did you make that choice? How did you make that leap?
Well, so I go to an urban church, and the church, pastor approached Ellen and I have a long-term interest in food, eating. People know me will say, "He eats more than any person I know."
My
Um,
husband could give you a run for his
alright,
money.
good. Let's
Yeah,
do
and
that
he's
sometime.
fit and thin and just yeah, we are very food focused here in our
Yeah.
house. But anyway.
So I'm very food focused, and many of the books I've read on my bookshelves are about food,
Mhm.
and third world and this sort of thing. I'm interested in that topic. Uh, always have been. And so the pastor approached us and said, "We have a vacant lot and we want to do a community garden on it. Would you like to do it?" I said, "I'd love to do that." So Ellen and I, did the kind of recruitment and a lot of the physical labor and the planning and all that sort of thing. And by doing that in the city that this is in, New Brunswick, they have about 10 other gardens, and we would meet once a month in the season to talk about, common problems, sharing resources, and that sort of thing. Well, I got to know the manager of the biggest garden in the city, a fairly, and it's pretty big. Uh, and she was leaving at the end of the year, and she said, "How about if you take this job?" When I said, "I would love to do that." So I was able to do that full time. Oh, I didn't say this part. I was doing the volunteer garden thing for 3 years while I was still an attorney.
I see.
And then I shifted I was doing, that volunteer stuff on the weekend and then, weeknights and that sort of thing. And then I shifted over to the big garden after I had retired. So that was just fortuitous the whole time of her departure or her knowing me and offering me the job. And so I did that for 9 years and really loved it. It was great. I still
Were you able to
do.
keep doing it during the you were able to keep doing it during the lockdowns?
Yeah, so I felt really grateful for that, and also, kinda guilty in a sense that I was living the life I wanted to live during that time, and my kids, for example, were not. They were at home looking for jobs on their computers, and so on and so forth, and I was out there in the sun talking to people in English and Spanish and planting things and just just unaffected by the whole thing, and yet seeing right in my household and among some other people I knew this complete disruption.
Mhm.
I just felt like, survivor's guilt sort of thing.
Yeah. Um, I
So
just wanna make the another this is another weird, point of convergence or connection. I lived in New Brunswick for a
really?
summer. I did. When I was in college, I got an internship working in Elizabeth of all places,
Okay.
and a friend of mine had I don't even know how this happened, but I ended up getting a room at a fraternity on a Rutgers campus, and my friend Cindy said, "I'm coming out to live with you for the summer." So she came out, and I commuted to work every day, and she got sort of just a job, whatever, and we had such a great summer living in New Brunswick. So, anyway, small world.
Yeah, you'll have to come back. We'll hang out.
Um, I might, or you have to come to Indiana, now that we're, like, a ginormous football town. I don't know if you watched the game last
Oh,
night, but
well, I'm an Alabama fan,
oh,
so,
shh, shh.
and I used to live, in McNutt which is right near the stadium,
Yeah,
and
well, this is
I knew guys on the football team then.
yeah, well,
My
now they're
roommate
all celebrities, so,
yeah, no,
yeah,
exactly.
it's a whole
Hired
different
guns.
world. Yep,
Yes.
yep, yep. So, um, so back to your books.
Yeah.
because I want to help spread the word about them because they're so good. Tell people a little bit more about them and how people can get them, and then talk about your Substack too, just to get as many people as possible aware of your work, not just to promote you, which isn't probably your motivation at all, but because I like to share beautiful things with people. Like there's to put beauty into the world, even though the subject matter of this is really it's sad and poignant and wrong, and it talks to a terrible thing that happened, but they're beautiful pieces and they connect us with humanity. So I want more people to know about them.
Thanks, Joni. So that's just, more than I deserve, but thank you.
Not true.
Uh, uh, Someone asked me, I've met with 60 or 70 readers in person by now,
Yeah.
and talked with 60 or 70 more on the phone in all parts of the US and in other parts of the world as well. It's been really nice. It's my new set of friends who live
Yeah.
all over the place.
Very moving.
Yeah, it's been really nice. And one of them asked me one night, "How long does it take you to write one of your Substack posts?" And this is someone who I'll just say had a very strong academic pedigree, and so did her husband, who was with me. And I kind of smiled and I said, "Longer than I would like to admit." And they kind of laughed because I spent a lot of time on these, and um, the first draft is goes very quickly.
Mhm.
But to put it in the form that you need to put it in, so you're not wasting people's time,
Mm.
takes the additional large increment of time, probably 4/5 of it.
Mhm.
I've never run a stopwatch. If I was in a law firm, I'd be running a watch every time I sat down to write and revise it and whatever, and it would add up to a lot of hours, and I don't even wanna know what those number of hours are. That's why I don't do it. But I take a long time, like, this was it Mark Twain said? "I was gonna write you a short letter, but I didn't have time, so I wrote a long one instead."
Oh gosh, that's really brilliant.
Isn't that brilliant?
Anyone who writes, and I have written, not well, but anyone who writes knows that to be profoundly true. And
That's
your
exactly.
essays, and again, I'm such a fan. Your essays read like a first or a natural. They're so conversational and they're so natural. They are effortless. It's like that when you're watching a figure skater and you're just like, wow, and you like, I want to do that. It's so effortless, and then you remember that they've spent a lifetime honing that craft and
Right.
practicing and practicing. So, yeah, they don't yeah, it's of course you spend a lot of time on them, but when you read them, they're just so fluid and effortless and accessible.
Thanks. They're not that long,
No,
uh,
mm-mm.
and so you could say, "How could you spend 10 hours?" I didn't even know what the amount of time is, but writing something like that, and they said, "Yeah, it's all the edits you don't see,"
Yeah, yeah,
stuff that I
yeah,
decided to leave out, and, um, so that's a big part of the process, yeah.
yeah. And so the Substack, you have a decent amount of following on Substack, and then to make sure that this work was preserved, right, as part of the historical record, so people can pick this up and say, "This is what happened to those people," or "This is what happened to us." I think that's really valuable because the people who are writing the history right now are not writing this, which is also instructive when you think back on other periods of time. It raises the question, what was really happening then that we aren't getting to see, right? Did other people write these kinds of books? So you wrote these books, you decided to self publish and sell them directly.
Yeah.
So talk about that and how they're available to people.
Well, I'd gladly, let a publisher pick up the ball and run with it. There was some talk for a while that Brownstone was gonna do it, and that
Mhm.
lost traction. You have to ask someone else about why that happened. But,
Yeah,
uh,
that's well, and I will.
I tried to reach out to publishers, and I don't know how much you know about the publishing industry. I don't know how much I know about it, but I know that they won't publish anything. They won't consider anything unless it comes through an agent. So the
Mm,
agents are their gatekeepers.
right,
And, unless you know an agent, you're going nowhere, and agents tend to be, um, on the side of the lockdown, shall we say.
right, right. They're
So
part of the establishment.
they are, and So there was that structural barrier. I knew I was never going to be able to, get it through agents like that. I tried, but it didn't work. Um,
I may have an idea for you, so let's
oh,
talk afterward.
okay,
Yeah.
great. That would be great
Somebody I
because
connected with during my work, on, opposing this stuff at Dartmouth.
it's kind of nice, Jonah, because I've sold a fair amount of the books. I'm not
Good.
going to say how many, but people ask me to sign them, and I send them out. I do all the order fulfillment myself. I put them in envelopes and I write a little note, message in there, of mutual support. And
Mhm.
I send it out to people and I address it to Arizona and to Wyoming and to Hawaii and Alaska and so forth. And it's just kind of fun to take a pen and write, Anchorage, Alaska on
Mhm.
it,
Mhm.
So I've been doing that. And I just I wanted there to be a record of it, like you said, because I was on Medium for a while. When I
Mhm.
first started writing and posting stuff on the internet, I was on Medium, and about a year in, someone told on me in Medium. I wrote a post about this, and Medium took all my stuff down,
Wow.
all of it.
Wow.
You know,
So
uh,
were you able to recover it, or did you have a
they,
backup copy?
you know what? I'm not good at that sort of thing, but they gave me 30 days, and I was able to download most of them. So I do have them, and some of them became Substack posts,
Mhm.
um, and some didn't.
What
But
reason did they give you for, taking down your personal essays and your personal opinions where you don't give medical advice or anything of the sort?
it was just a generic misinformation
Ah,
sort of
yeah.
characterization,
I think
and
people don't realize that that happened, who people who didn't question the narrative, they don't realize that happened to the extent that it did, because censorship is beautiful because it's invisible, right? You don't
true,
know what you're not seeing.
true,
Um,
totally
wow,
true.
so, that's really, really disappointing. I mean, I know a lot of people who were censored in the same way, and so then you found a home on Substack.
Right, exactly. Just a quick side story, and I think that was on Substack, but not in the book. My boss approached me at work one day at the
Your
garden,
boss at the guard, okay,
yeah, and said to me, "Do you know a certain guy's name?" And I said, "Sounds familiar, but not so familiar I can, place it." And I said, "Why do you ask?" She said, "Because he says you're spreading misinformation on Medium." I said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." I said, "First of all, everything I say in Medium is true, and that you should lose your job over it." I said, "First of all, everything I said
oh
there
my
was true."
gosh. Is
Yeah.
this a person you knew personally or just, like,
I don't I
oh,
didn't
it doesn't
know.
even matter. I mean,
No,
gosh.
because yeah, that would really bother me, right? It's like, talk to me, don't talk to the boss, right?
Well, and
But
also the notion that you're doing this and you should lose your job as a gardener.
right,
Like, like,
exactly.
it's just cuckoo.
It is.
It just speaks to how punishing people want it to be.
Exactly.
Anyway, go on. Terrible.
So I said to my boss, I said, "With all due respect, I know far more about this than you do, and I'll stand here today for as long as you want to and discuss all of this
Yes.
back and forth. You can ask me a question, I'll answer it. I'll ask you a question, we'll answer. We'll do this for as long as you're willing to do it because I'm confident in my position." And so she said, "No, no, I don't want to do that. And I understand that you have First Amendment rights." I said, "That's right, I do. And if you take my job away based on this, I'm going to sue you."
Good.
Um, and she said, I'm not threatening that or anything, but this guy apparently reached out to Medium and he reported me because the whole thing happened at the same time and they took my stuff down. So, you know, that's the kind of stuff that happened, like you said, Joni. Nobody knows about it, but it happened
Well,
on that scale.
yes, it did. And the people, I shouldn't say this because it's a big generalization, but I find that many of the people who were so happy to do things like that believe that they would have been, like, helping Anne Frank get under the floorboards. Like, it's just this complete disconnect, and they are the same people now saying, "Why doesn't anyone care about democracy?" It's and that happens on both sides. People care about values when they are supported by their worldview at the time, or if the people that are on their team that are doing the thing, So it's so disheartening. I just can't believe somebody did that, but I guess I don't know why. I am still amazed, and I've never gotten over being newly shocked by what happened. Like, you forget something and then you see a post, I've mentioned this before, of, like, high school track runners outdoors with masks on. And then you think, "We really lived through that." Just crazy. So you moved to Substack and you've been, on Substack for quite a while. I mean, I don't know how many posts you have, but a lot.
Many, many. I haven't missed a week in a long time.
Wow, that's great. And
I
I'll put
think
that in the show notes so that people can find you.
yeah, thanks. Some people say to me, "It's over. Stop talking about it," right?
Mhm.
But I feel like you've heard about the mothers of the disappeared in Latin America. The youths that were, viewed to be activists and kidnapped in the dark of the night and dropped out of
Mm.
helicopters, right, and never accounted
Awful.
for. And it
Yeah.
happened on a mass scale, right? But like this whole thing, now everyone wants to bury and act like it didn't happen. Well, these mothers, it happened in Nicaragua. It also happened in Argentina and maybe another country or two because Latin America is a bit like that. Uh, they every week would go to the town square or the city square and hold up pictures of their sons. Yeah.
It makes me sick.
Oh,
Can
yeah.
you imagine?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that's how I view myself now. Nobody wants to hear about it, but I'm here to tell you about it.
Yeah.
So regardless of whether you want to hear it or not.
It takes a certain amount of well, it takes morals and courage to continue doing that, and I think it's inspiring to me because it has to be done for many reasons. It's first of all, it's therapeutic for the people who, lived through it and were, affected by it, who are awake. It maybe will go a little way toward accountability, and it will maybe will wake some people up so that when this comes down the pike again, because it will. I mean, it's not like, "Oh, well, we did our tyranny and we're done." It's not, it's this human nature. I think it's picking up speed and I want as big of a network as possible in my own life of people who are going to do some resistance, who are going to say no. And I think that part of the reason they couldn't go as far as they wanted with the mandates, with, like, the passports, like, New York City wanted a vaccine passport with all this craziness, is because there was at least a small number of people who were making noise about it, and I think that did make a difference. It's a
Yeah.
little off topic. One thing I wanted to just a memory that I have is during when New York when remember we couldn't cross state borders, some and I was driving to see my mom in upstate New York, and I was coming from Indiana, and, the rule was you had to quarantine for 2 weeks once you got at the new address where you're gonna be in New York. And you whether you were sick or not or healthy or not, you had to shelter in place for 2 weeks before you could go anywhere, and you had to register with the state, and I was driving because I always drive. The minute I crossed into New York State, I had registered. My phone rang. I am not making this up, and it was the Department of Health checking in with me and reminding me that I had to take my temperature and report into them every single day if by text, and, I forget about that, and that was the requirement for me to go and visit my mother, you know, crazy, and people were fine with it.
It's another reason not to own a phone.
I know, but I have an easy pass, so, there's that. They
Yeah.
just know where you are at all
No,
times.
I know. I don't mean to make light of it because I know
No,
that
it's
was
it's true
extremely
though.
disturbing part of the whole thing too. Like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, crossing a state line is a consequential public health sort of
Yes,
transgression.
somebody in their personal car, and I didn't have a mask on, so, that probably they probably saw that too. But back to your books.
Yeah.
So, people can order the books
Yeah.
directly off your Substack site,
Mhm.
and I've ordered them, and they, arrive and with a beautiful note at the beginning, and they are just wonderful to have. Did you do the cover illustrations, by the way?
The one with the mask is, at the garden, I did a lot of art, like, on plywood. Yeah, and so that's on a piece of plywood in my basement right now that's
Oh,
2 feet by 3 feet or whatever,
so good.
and I display it in front of my house, because I live in a place where people walk by,
Mhm.
quite often. Not now, but, I do it, and so that's the one cover, and the other one my daughter did for me.
So,
Just
which is great. It's a doctor, he's like a shepherd.
Yeah, you might say he bears a resemblance to a Dr. Fauci or something like
You might
you
say that.
know,
Early
yeah.
in the pandemic, I think it's our daughter who said to my husband, "You look like Fauci." And then, my husband grew a beard very shortly after that, so I don't know, might have been coincidence. So, before we break, Mark, because 'cause we're getting up on time, and you've expressed so much of this during the interview, so maybe this question is superfluous. I like to ask people, like, during this chaotic time of division and an onslaught of all the stuff coming at us and dividing us, this craziness. What do you do to live the quality of life that you appear to live? Like any advice for people?
Well, one thing is, and I mentioned it already, talking to people who
Mm,
saw the light, shall we say. It's affirming. The kind of bond that we feel is obvious and immediate. So
yes.
I do as much of that as I can. Another thing I did throughout is, well, I was able to work, but motion to me is joyful. So I do a bunch of things to stay in motion. I still play basketball. It's
You ice
nice.
skate, right? You're
Yeah, I used to play hockey, so I hockey skate a bit. I like to dance a bit. And if I can't do any of those things at a given time, I'll take a walk. So
Mhm.
staying in motion, I think, is good, especially if you can get your pulse up. Uh, my wife is a wonderful person, and to spend time with her is just is just a great thing. It's just a blessing. It never gets old, and I get old, but that doesn't get old, right? So um, those things really. I play a little music too. Not very well, but it's engaging to try to
Mm,
improve a little bit, and that's all.
yeah.
So those are the things I think. Count my blessings because I know a lot of people dealing with a lot of stuff right now.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
all do, and as we get older, we know more.
Yeah. So true.
Counting my blessings relative to them and hoping that they're okay.
Yeah.
Praying that they're okay. So those things keep me busy.
All
Uh,
good, real stuff. I sincerely mean this. We are lucky to have you on the planet, Mark.
yeah, it's
Um,
well,
I'm so happy I know you.
that's that's thanks for saying that, Joni.
Yeah, I mean it.
I'll say this as an aside. I wrote a bunch of stories where I'm in the story, a protagonist or whatever, and sometimes they don't look good, but I could write a lot of stories where I don't look very good at all. But I'm not writing those stories.
Well, that's
I have them
okay.
in my head. I know what happened, but I'm not gonna tell everyone else about
Well, who does that, you know? It's not the best thing. Oh, I have something on my chin. There you go. Not looking good. All right. So I just want to thank you for doing this. Where can people find you? And I will put all of your links in the show notes. I think more people need to read you for
Thank
sure. So where can we
uh,
find you?
well, the Substack is called Dispatches from a Scamdemic.
Hmm.
I think you can just put a search in with that and it'll come up, and I got 260 something posts up there. So, the books, um, people can email me at forecheck, FORECHECK 32 at Gmail. So hockey illusion there.
I wondered. Yeah.
And, if they're interested in the books, let me know and I'll mail them out
Hmm.
and sign them if you wish me to. And so those are the two places.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for this. It was terrific. And we're going to say goodbye, but hang around because I need to have this uploaded to the cloud.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you,
John.
Mark. All right. Bye bye.